Hey guys, tonight we slide deep into the past, back to a time before toothbrushes, before toothpaste, and definitely before Novocaine. Tonight we're stepping into the foul-smelling, nerve-rattling, occasionally chicken-paid world of medieval dentistry. You wake in a small wooden shack, the scent of old herbs, candle wax, and something vaguely metallic clinging to the walls. A rooster crows somewhere outside. Or is that a patient? Hard to tell. The air is cool and damp, drifting in through the cracks in the timber. Sunlight filters through in streaks, catching the tiny motes of dust that dance lazily between your crude tools. And by tools, we mean objects that today might be classified more as torture devices. Iron pincers, worn files, and a curved hook you're honestly not sure why you own. You stretch, bones creaking like the floorboards beneath you, and wonder, not for the first time, how you ended up here. Part apothecary, part barber, part reluctant torturer. You are the town's most trusted tooth man. And by trusted, we mostly mean the only option. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when everyone listens in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You tie your stained apron around your waist. It used to be white. Now it's a blotchy canvas of browns and reds, a wearable history of hard-earned coin and poorly aimed blood. You check your tools. Pliers, still vaguely sticky. Bone scraper, dull again. Your small wooden cup of cleansing tincture sits by the door. You take a sip, grimace and shudder. It's mostly wine, with a dash of rosemary and maybe a hint of regret. A knock. No time to delay. You open the creaky door, and your first patient shuffles in. He's middle-aged, face gaunt, one cheek bulging unnaturally, like he's smuggling a walnut in there. His breath hits you before his words do. A wall of fermented onions, old cheese, and something that smells vaguely like an infected wound. Because it is. He sits. You don't ask how he is. That's not how this works. He opens wide. You peer inside with your candle stub, squinting to get a clearer look. It's bad. The back molar is blackened and cracked, the gum above it purple and inflamed. You nod gravely. He nods back, equally gravely. This is the medieval version of consent. You reach for your pliers. But let's rewind for a second. Your job didn't appear out of nowhere. Dentistry in the Middle Ages was loose. There were no licenses, no diplomas hanging proudly on the wall, no board certifications. You learned by watching others, or maybe by just deciding one day, you know what? I'll yank teeth. Barbers often doubled as dentists. They were already cutting hair after all. How much worse could gums be? Monks did some dental work too, especially in monasteries where herbal remedies were part of their divine duties. You learned from an old man named Theo, who used to practice out of the back of a bakery. You're 60% sure he wasn't a real baker. Now it's your craft. You light a bit of dried sage, partly for the smell, partly for the superstition. Some believe it calms the pain. Others say it wards off evil spirits. Historians still argue whether these rituals were more for the patient or the dentist. You position the man's head against a wooden board nailed to the back of your wall, not for comfort, for leverage. You need him steady when the pulling starts. You grip the molar with your iron tongs. The tooth squeals as you twist. Your patient groans, fists clenched. You mutter something reassuring in Latin, even though you don't know Latin. It's the tone that matters. One twist, two, then crack. The tooth comes loose with a wet pop. Blood follows. You stuff a wad of moss in his mouth. He's panting, eyes wide, You hand him a sip of wine and nod. He spits the tooth into your hand. It's black, cracked, and deeply unsettling. You toss it into the small wooden bowl you keep for trophies. He pays you with a bundle of leeks and 2 eggs. 1 egg is cracked. That's fine. You've had worse. You wipe your hands on your apron and sigh. Just another Tuesday. The next patient is already outside. You open the door, and your next patient bolts upright like he's already halfway regretting showing up. He's young, barely 20, shirt hanging loose over his bony frame, eyes darting around your workspace like he's trying to memorize an escape route. You motion him in with a lazy wave. He hesitates. You raise one eyebrow. He obeys. The floorboards creak under his feet as he walks past shelves stacked with bottles, scraps of parchment, and dried herbs that have definitely seen better centuries. He sits, legs trembling, on the short stool you proudly call your operating chair. It's less a chair and more a piece of tree that gave up being a tree a long time ago. You offer him a sip from your tin cup. He declines. Brave or foolish. Then he opens his mouth. You lean in, candle held close, and brace for the view. There it is. Lower incisor. Shattered. Possibly from a fall, possibly from gnawing something he shouldn't have. Medieval diets weren't gentle. Between stone-ground bread, grit-filled stews, and the occasional surprise pebble in your porridge, teeth didn't stand a chance. You whistle low through your teeth. He tries to interpret your expression. You give him the same look you give everyone. Half pity, half calculation. This won't be simple. Your hand hovers over your tray of instruments. You pick the least terrifying-looking pair of pliers and a dull, flat-tipped hook, and give them a quick wipe on your apron. Sterilization hasn't been invented yet, but hey, you remembered to wipe. You're already ahead of the curve. He asks if it will hurt. You answer with silence and a tight-lipped smile. Now, here's where things get interesting. In this era, pain was expected. You didn't walk into a dentist hoping for comfort. You walked in praying you'd walk out. There's no anesthetic. Not unless you count strong wine, opium, if you're lucky and rich, or a hearty punch to the jaw. You reach for your trusty option, a thin wooden stick. You hand it to him. Bite. He stares at it like it's a joke. It isn't. He puts it between his teeth, closes his eyes, and nods. You position the pliers, finding just the right grip. And then you yank. Hard. He makes a sound halfway between a scream and a barn animal. The stick snaps in his mouth. His hand flails, knocks over a jar of mint paste. Wasted. You don't stop. One more twist. A crack. A pop. You've got it. You hold the broken incisor up like a prize fish. He doesn't look. He's too busy groaning and blinking away tears. You pack the gum with moss and tell him to spit. He does, onto the floor. You sigh. The bucket was 2 feet away. As he recovers, he mumbles something about payment. You wave it off for now. His sister brings you onions later. You sit on your stool, rolling the extracted tooth between your fingers. Then you drop it in your bowl of glory. A small wooden dish full of cracked, blackened, and crooked relics. Each one a story. Each one a scream. The rest of the day continues like this. More patience. More pain. One woman comes in with what looks like a fist-sized swelling on her jaw. You know better than to touch it right away. Infections like that burst if provoked. And they don't always stop there. You offer her a poultice of garlic and sage. She insists on prayer instead. You say nothing. She leaves, still swollen, eyes full of quiet dread. Historians still argue whether medieval dental practitioners were considered respected professionals or back-alley butchers. The truth? Depends on the town. Depends on the tools. Depends on whether your last patient lived to say thanks. You lean back, stretching your arms, listening to the creaks and groans of the old wood around you. Your hands ache. Your back feels like it's been kicked by a mule. You reach for a chunk of dried bread and gnaw thoughtfully, even as your own molars complain. You feel something crunch. You hope it was bread. Outside, the sun begins to lower, casting golden streaks across your wall. But the line of patients hasn't gotten any shorter. You glance at your bowl. It's full. You dump it out behind the shack, in the spot you half-jokingly call the molar graveyard. There's probably a small rodent colony living among the roots and enamel. You head back in, clean off your tools, and splash some water on your face. You're only halfway through the day, and your next patient is already moaning before they sit down. The moaning starts before they even reach the stool. You glance up and see an elderly man clutching the side of his face like it might fall off. His steps are slow, his jaw tight, and he wheezes as he lowers himself onto the stool with the grace of a wounded goat. You don't need to ask what's wrong. You can see the swelling from across the room. He opens his mouth. You see it immediately. A mound of red, swollen gum, shiny with infection. A molar sits cockeyed, barely clinging on, surrounded by a halo of pus. You take one step back, not for fear, but for the smell. It hits like spoiled broth mixed with rusty metal. He winces as you prod lightly around the gum with your bone pick. A puff of warmth escapes as you press, and the man grips the sides of the stool so hard you think it might snap in two. You pull back and exhale slowly. This isn't a simple pull. This is a festering, angry infection. And in the medieval world, that's not just painful. It's dangerous. See, in your time, an infected tooth isn't just a dental issue. It's potentially fatal. With no antibiotics, an abscess can spread quickly through the bloodstream. If you're lucky, it swells and drains. If not, it crawls down into the jaw, the neck, the lungs. You've seen it happen. Once a man had a swollen throat for 3 days before he simply stopped breathing. You buried him behind the apothecary, under a marker made of driftwood. So this tooth? It's not optional. It has to go. You reach for a small clay bowl of holy water. Yes, really, and dab it onto a cloth, pressing it to the man's face. You're not sure if it actually helps, but people feel better when saints are involved. Historians still argue whether holy water was seen as spiritual comfort or a legitimate antiseptic. You don't argue. You use it both ways. Then, while the cloth soaks and the man groans through his clenched teeth, you prepare your workspace. You wipe your pliers. Rewrap the moss wad. Pour 2 fingers of your strongest alcohol and offer him a swig. He takes one, coughs, then takes 2 more. You offer a prayer, just in case. Then you begin. The pliers sink down, gripping the rotten molar at just the right angle. You give a tiny test tug. The man whimpers. You breathe deep, say 1, 2, 3, and pull. It doesn't budge. You twist. It cracks, partly. He screams. You reposition. Pull again. Sweat slides down your back. Your fingers shake. The man flails, and you shout for the apprentice to hold him down. You didn't want to use the wedge, but now you must. You fetch the thin, chisel-like tool from your shelf, one of the oldest instruments you own, passed down by a long-dead bone man whose name no one remembers. You wedge it between tooth and gum and tap it with a mallet. The man yells again. One more tap. The tooth shifts. You grip it again with the pliers, give one violent jerk, and it rips free. A gout of blood splatters your apron. The molar is black, broken in half, and dripping with pale yellow pus. You place it gently into your dun bowl and stuff moss into the wound with shaking hands. The man slumps forward, breathing heavily. You rest a hand on his shoulder. He's alive. That's what counts. You give him the last of your wine. He nods slowly, tears brimming. He'll need to rest, and hopefully, the swelling will subside. If not, well, you clean the blood off your hands with a rag. The apprentice retches in the corner. You tell him to mop the floor before the next patient. You sit, breath catching up to you, and take a moment to enjoy the silence. Then you hear the softest sound, the creak of the door. A woman steps in, holding a child. He can't be more than 6. His face is puffy. He's missing 2 baby teeth. He clutches a cloth rabbit and stares at you like you're the big bad wolf. You sigh and rise to your feet. One crisis down. Another begins. You guide them in gently. The mother explains through teary eyes that he hasn't eaten in 2 days. His mouth hurts too much. You lean in to look. It's an infected milk tooth, still partly lodged, the gum around it swollen and raw. Children are different. Faster to heal, quicker to panic. You don't use the pliers, not this time. Instead, you wrap your hand in cloth, grip the loose tooth with 2 fingers, and whisper to the boy to count to 10. He gets to 3, and it's out. He cries anyway, but from shock more than pain. You hand him a tiny carved wooden token, a charm, maybe luck, maybe a distraction. The mother thanks you profusely and gives you a chunk of cheese wrapped in leaves. It's moldy. You smile anyway. You drop the tiny tooth in a separate dish, your baby's bowl. You're not sure why, but it feels wrong to mix them. Outside, the bell chimes again. It's not even midday, and your hands are already shaking. You wipe your hands again. It doesn't help. The smell of old blood and rot clings to your fingers like a guilty memory. You glance at your tray, at the tools laid out like old grim friends. There's no finesse to them, no polish, just wood and iron, stained by years of practice. You pick them up one by one, turning each over in your palm. First, the tooth key. Not everyone has one of these. It's a relic, passed down to you by an apothecary who once traveled with knights. The tool resembles a small iron crank, designed to grip a molar and twist it out of the jaw. Brutal, effective. The key's handle is smooth from use, its claw rusted slightly at the edge. You file it down each morning, but never enough. Then your bone scraper, long and flat, with a dull edge meant to chip away calcified tartar. Mostly used on the few patients who still have teeth worth saving. It squeals when used. Most people don't ask for it twice. You have a set of pliers, of course, different sizes, no rubber grips, just cold iron, warmed by your hand, and the occasional hot breath from a candle. The large ones, used for molars. The small ones, incisors. The bent one, well, that's a mystery. It doesn't work on teeth, but it's always in the set. Then there's your mouth wedge, a carved piece of oak used to prop open a jaw during long procedures. The poor man who bites too hard, he'll learn what splinters taste like. You even have thread and needle. Coarse stuff. Used more for stitching cheeks than gums, but you've done both. You still remember the sailor with the busted molar and a jaw so swollen you thought he was hiding oranges. Some of your tools are custom made. One hook you fashioned from a bent horseshoe. Another? An old knife ground down to a stub. It's barely useful, but you keep it out of sentiment. Or superstition. A pouch of herbs sits nearby. Dried cloves, which you crush into a powder and pack into aching sockets. The smell is strong, sharp, almost pleasant. It masks the rot, which is worth more than gold sometimes. You also keep sage, lavender, and wormwood, your calming blend, not for the patients, for yourself. And then there are your leeches. Yes, leeches. Some patients request them. Others flinch at the sight. You keep them in a jar with damp moss. They're sluggish, black, and smell faintly of pond. You've used them to draw out bad humors from swollen jaws. Whether they help is anyone's guess. Historians still argue whether bloodletting genuinely improved dental infections or simply gave the illusion of action. You arrange everything on the table by size, then by danger level. You once made a chart for that. You burned it after a tooth key mishap left a man unconscious for 3 days. The apprentice returns, his face pale. You hand him the scraper. He flinches. You'll clean them today, you say. Use vinegar, and if the vinegar runs out, wine, but not the good wine. He nods and walks stiffly toward the back. You take this moment, brief and golden, to sit. Not many understand the physical toll of your work. Your hands are calloused, joints swollen. Your back aches. Your knees creak when you crouch. You chew ginger to keep your stomach settled, especially after one too many surprise eruptions during an extraction. You flex your fingers, roll your shoulders, and check the candlelight glinting off your tray. You wonder what your tools would say if they could speak. Then you realize they do. Each scrape, squeal, and crack tells a story. The snap of a molar, the scream of a jaw too wide, the hiss of pain too old to run from. You grab a rag and begin polishing the tooth key. The iron is cold, always cold. You once tried heating it over a flame. That patient never returned. Outside, the wind has picked up. Leaves rustle against the wooden walls of your little shop. A faint drizzle taps on the roof. The bell chimes. You look up. A man enters, cradling his cheek, but not in pain. His face is whole. He even smiles. You narrow your eyes. Cleaning, he says. Just that. You almost laugh. A cleaning. That rare, mystical procedure where you don't pull anything. And the patient leaves with the same number of teeth he arrived with. You nod and motion him to the stool. He sits, jaw relaxed. You tie a cloth around his neck, just for effect. Then you reach for the scraper. The first sound is always the worst. That high-pitched squeal of iron against tartar, like nails on a church door. He flinches, but holds still. You scrape. Rinse. Scrape again. He coughs at the taste. You offer him a clove to chew. You finish by packing some mint leaves between his teeth and massaging his gums with vinegar on a cloth. It burns. He doesn't complain. He leaves smiling, a few coins lighter. You sit back, exhale slowly, and stare again at your tray. The tools of your trade, your instruments of mercy, and occasionally of mayhem. The rain taps harder now, tiny fingers on the roof above, like a quiet warning that the next patient won't be as easy. You're right. Because she arrives soaked, furious, and limping. You recognize her. Marta, the market seller. Loud, strong, known for arguing about onions and biting people who try to haggle too low. She's rarely quiet. But today, she's silent. That's the giveaway. You motion her inside. She drops into the stool like it personally insulted her, arms folded, jaw clenched tighter than a miser's purse. You wait. Then she opens her mouth. It's not just teeth. It's everything. Inflamed gums, black spots on the molars, and a deep hole in one of her top incisors that looks like a mouse took up residence there. The scent is fierce, like meat left in the sun for too long. You nod slowly. Bad one. She grunts. You begin gathering tools, but Marta stops you with a glare. She slams something down on the table, a pouch. You open it. Dried herbs, a waxy yellow root, and a small jar of honey. Use this, she rasps. You blink. Ah, the homemade remedy. In the medieval world, everyone is a part-time healer. Toothaches are blamed on everything from foul humors to bad spirits. Some say the pain comes from sins, others from worms burrowing into your molars, and so people experiment. Onion poultices, garlic compresses, crushed frog powder, burnt rosemary and salt applied with a heated spoon. You've tried many. You've regretted most. You dip your finger into the honey. It's thick and dark, almost medicinal in smell. Marta's eyes are burning with desperation. You can tell she doesn't trust you, but she trusts her grandmother's recipe even less. That's a compliment, probably. You scoop a little and rub it onto the inflamed gum. She winces. You wait. Nothing happens. You look back at her. Now what? She shrugs. That's it. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs harder. You sigh and reach for the pliers. She slaps your hand. You sigh again and reach for your mint rub. Let's try this instead, you mutter. She allows it. Barely. As you massage the swollen gum with your own blend, mint, vinegar, and a pinch of clove, you start talking. About the weather. About the rats in the flour bags. About how a monk once asked you to make him a gold tooth and you tried. It didn't stay in. She relaxes a little. You check the sore tooth again. Still throbbing. But maybe, just maybe, not rip it out right now bad. You tell her to come back in 3 days. If the pain spreads, you'll yank it. Otherwise, more vinegar and mint rub. She growls but agrees. Leaves you a turnip and a cracked egg as payment. You nod. Fair trade. Once she's gone, you clean your hands and wonder how many people out there are walking around with half-solved infections and pockets full of questionable herbs. Then the apprentice speaks. She said something about toothworms? You pause. Yes, the infamous medieval toothworm theory. See, people in this era often believed that a worm caused toothaches. A literal worm. Tiny, invisible, burrowed inside the tooth, wiggling around and chewing from within. Some claim to see them, especially after pulling a particularly infected tooth with grayish pus. That, they said, was the worm escaping. Others tried to lure the worm out with burning henbane seeds. You'd hold the seed near the bad tooth and wait for the worm to flee the heat. Spoiler, it never did. Historians still argue whether this belief was widespread or more of a folk tale passed around in desperation. Either way, it was common enough that people feared feeding the worm with sweets. Of course, they didn't know about sugar's effect on enamel yet, so maybe the worm theory was accidentally right. You've never seen a toothworm. Just rot. Just decay. But you keep your opinions to yourself. If calling it a worm convinces someone to let you pull it, you'll let them call it a dragon. You hear a knock on the back wall. It's not the patient door. It's your side entrance. A cloaked man stands there, tall and dry despite the rain. He enters without invitation. Do you sell tooth powder? He asks. You do. You lift a small jar filled with ground sage, salt, mint, and powdered eggshells. It smells sharp and earthy. He hands you a silver coin. You blink. No one pays in silver. He adds, I want 5 jars. You hesitate. This won't fix a bad tooth. He nods. It's for breath. Ah, a rich man. You wrap the jars in cloth and hand them over. He tucks them into his robe like they're secrets. He never smiles. Not once. You wonder what's hiding in his mouth. After he leaves, you sit again, staring at your worn stool and tired tools. Your job isn't just pulling teeth. It's reading people. Their pain. Their pride. Their hopes that a clove, a coin, or a jar of dusty powder will let them sleep at night. And sometimes, it does. The door swings open before the bell even finishes its jingle. 2 men step inside, soaked and heavy-booted, their clothes damp from rain, and their expressions twisted into barely concealed skepticism. You know the type. Traveling merchants, or messengers, or something else that involves more road than soap. One of them holds his jaw with a kind of casual disdain, like it's beneath him to acknowledge the throbbing pain obviously pulsing through his face. The other man looks around your shack like he's checking for rats. You think, good luck. They're hiding. You've trained them well. The patient, the grimacing one, pulls down his scarf and reveals the culprit. A swollen gum bulging below his lower teeth, shiny and flushed with red. There's no hiding it. He's in agony, even if he's pretending not to be. You motion toward the stool. He glances at it like it might explode. Eventually he sits. You approach slowly, wiping your hands, your tools, your conscience. Then, from beneath his cloak, he pulls out a pendant. Not just any pendant. A saint's tooth, or what he claims is a relic from Saint Apollonia herself, the patron saint of dental pain. He holds it up like a shield between you and him. You stare. Here we go again. You've seen these relics before. Supposed tooth fragments from saints, holy bones, blessed ash meant to cure ailments. In towns with no barber surgeons, people clutch them like life jackets. Some swear by them. Others say it's just wishful thinking wrapped in pewter. He tells you very seriously that he's only here to support the extraction with prayer. You nod, equally seriously, and don't mention that one of your jars has a chicken bone you also call a saint's relic for discount customers. With one hand on the pendant and the other on his jaw, he agrees to the treatment. His friend leans against the back wall, arms crossed, probably there to ensure you don't kill him, or rob him, or both. You hand the patient a mug of warm spiced wine, steeped in clove and sage. It won't stop the pain, but it'll keep him busy. You dab some crushed mint leaf on the gums, more to distract than to treat. He clenches his eyes, then opens them again, then closes them harder. You ready the tooth key. Remember that one? The twist and yank method. Not great. But when a molar is set deep, sometimes you need a little torque. You set the claw of the tooth key around the infected molar. His breathing quickens. You wait for the nod. There it is. You twist. The root resists like a drunkard leaving a tavern. The entire jaw groans in protest. His arms flail slightly, but he holds on to the pendant like it's tethered to his soul. The tooth gives. With one final fleshy pop, it comes loose. You hold it up to the light, cracked at the base, dark near the root. Definitely cursed if teeth can carry curses. You hand him a cloth soaked in vinegar. He presses it to the socket, too dazed to speak. His friend steps forward, still silent, hands him another coin and leads him out. They leave behind a faint trail of damp mud, dried blood, and holy hope. You wonder if the pendant will make it into the next village story. Probably. You take a moment to yourself. Light a stick of sage. Not for healing, for the smell. The rains brought in the scent of damp wool and wet breath. And then, just as you're preparing to rest your hands, a soft knock. It's not from the front. It's from the back door. You open it slowly. A monk stands there, soaked through but calm. He holds a basket covered in linen. Inside, herbs. Real ones. Fresh. Basil. Thyme. And tucked between the bundles, a folded letter bearing a seal you don't recognize. He says nothing. Just bows, hands over the basket, and walks away into the fog. You close the door and open the letter. It's written in careful script. Latin. Half you understand, half you guess. But the message is clear. A nobleman, far from here, tooth pain, seeks your specific talents. There's a promise of silver. Lots of it. You run your tongue across your own molars, all intact, for now. Serving nobles is risky. You get better pay, better wine, but also sharper swords if they don't like the results. Still, it's an invitation, and in your world, those don't come often. You fold the letter, set it beside your mortar and pestle, and glance at your tools. They're worn. but ready. You still have 3 more patients this afternoon. And your hands, they don't get to rest. Not yet. You wake before the sun the next day, because this morning is different. You've agreed to go. The letter from the monk still sits on your table, folded beneath a small leather pouch of silver. The nobleman, unnamed always, has summoned you. That means travel. That means servants watching your every move. That means if your fingers slip and his pain gets worse, you might not make it home. You wrap your tools carefully in oiled cloth, tucking each one in place like it's a beloved child. The pliers, the tooth key, the scraper, the file, a satchel of mint and dried clove, your best bottle of wine, of course, for anesthesia, and just in case, a clean shirt. The monk returns just after dawn with a cart, silent as ever. You climb in without a word. The road out of town is cold and bumpy. Trees whip by. The wheels squeak. And with every mile, you realize how far outside your comfort you're traveling. Hours pass. You chew a piece of dried apple and glance sideways at the monk. He hasn't moved since you started. His eyes are closed, lips moving in what might be prayer or memorized silence. Eventually, the road narrows. A gate. Then a long lane flanked by twisted hedges and stone walls that look older than memory. And then, the manor. It's no castle, but it tries. Tall arches, stone gargoyles with chipped teeth, ironic, and ivy strangling the corners like it wants to drag the place back into the dirt. You're escorted inside by servants who don't smile. They glance at your shoes, at your hands, at your bag. You're not one of them, and it shows. They lead you to a sitting chamber filled with heavy curtains, low candlelight, and the smell of dried roses and damp ash. The nobleman lies on a couch, propped by velvet pillows. His skin is pale, drawn tight around the eyes. His mouth is partially open, revealing a swollen upper lip and, yes, there it is, a molar, red around the root, practically humming with infection. He gestures weakly. You nod, step forward, and set your bag down on the nearest table. The servants withdraw, but only slightly. One lingers near the door, arms folded, eyes sharp. You approach, and you begin. No words, just the ritual. You unwrap your tools slowly, letting the nobleman see each one, letting him understand what's coming. You pour wine into a silver goblet and hand it over. He drinks, too quickly. Then he glares at you, not with hatred, with expectation. You dip a cloth in clove and gently press it to the swollen gum. He twitches but holds still. This man has endured battles, probably. Famine, betrayal. But a toothache? This humbles him. You reach for your smallest pliers. You've already judged this won't need the tooth key. Too risky on a high root. You angle his head gently, feel the tension in his jaw like it's trying to fight you already. He lets out a long breath. You grip the molar. Twist. Slowly. He groans. A servant flinches. You brace your elbow on the armrest and pull. There's a wet crack. Then another. The tooth doesn't want to leave. You twist again. He grips the armrest, white-knuckled, but he doesn't scream. Not yet. You pull again, and the molar gives. It tears loose with a small burst of blood and fluid, which you quickly blot with linen. You drop the tooth into your pouch without showing him. He slumps, gasping. You pack the socket with clove and moss, then hold his head gently as he sips more wine. He doesn't thank you, but he doesn't order your execution either. So that's something. The servant hands you a heavier pouch this time. Coin. You don't count it. Not here. You repack your tools, clean your hands with rose water someone brings on a tray, and bow once before leaving the room. You ride home in silence. The monk, still mute, simply nods as you climb from the cart near your shack. The pouch jingles as you hang it near your herbs. It's not just money. It's security. The nobleman's blood is still on your fingers, but your rent is covered for 3 months. You sleep well that night, until the next scream wakes you. Just before dawn, the scream splits the early morning like an axe through wet wood. You jolt upright, tangled in your blanket, the taste of rose water and dried mint still clinging to the back of your throat. Outside, it's not even light yet. Just the deep blue before dawn. Cold air snakes through the gaps in your shutters, and the scream echoes again. Closer now. You rise, slip on your boots, and open the door. A woman stumbles in the mud, half carrying a boy no older than 12. His face is twisted in pain, his hands clawing at his jaw like he's trying to dig the pain out himself. You don't ask questions. You just step aside and motion them in. They drop onto the stool without ceremony. She's panting. He's moaning. And you go into motion. You light a candle, grab your cloth, your cup, your smallest vial. You kneel in front of the boy, speaking softly, steadily. Not soothing, anchoring, something to hold him to this side of the storm. He opens his mouth, and it's gruesome. Half his gum is swollen and split. A tooth has fractured, jagged like shattered stone, and the wound is open to the air. The skin around it pulses with a sickly heat. His eyes flicker with the kind of panic that doesn't belong to children. You ask the mother what happened. She tells you in a rush he fell, bit down on a stone. The tooth snapped. That was 2 days ago. Since then, fever, shaking, and now the screaming. You nod once, sharply, and reach for the file. You're not pulling. Not yet. The root is broken, and if you go in now, you risk pushing the rest deeper. Instead, you file gently, shaving off the jagged edges of what remains. The boy jerks, but his mother steadies him. You pack the gum with ground clove and vinegar-soaked linen. You tell her, wait 2 days. If the fever drops, you'll finish the job. If not, well. She nods. She pays in bread. You don't ask for more. Once they leave, you finally breathe. But it's short-lived, because the next to arrive isn't a patient. It's the town scribe. He enters with a scowl and a small scroll. He slams it onto your table, muttering about improper warnings and unlicensed agony. You smile politely. He wants to remind you that technically, you're not permitted to operate without supervision. You want to remind him that when his molar cracked last fall, you were the one who kept him from biting his own tongue off in delirium. He knows, so he grumbles, and then he holds out a silver penny. His jaw hurts again. You motion to the stool. This time, you pack his gums with powdered sage and press a warm compress along his cheek. No extractions today, just an inflammation, a sore from clenching too hard. Probably stress, probably from yelling at people like you. You don't say that part out loud. He leaves without saying thank you. But he doesn't mention improper warnings again. You wash your hands and think about how strange it is, how you've become something between doctor, priest, and executioner. How people fear you and need you in equal measure. You don't have a title. No one calls you physician. You're just the tooth man, sometimes the pain guy, sometimes worse. You grab a crust of bread and gnaw it absently. One of your molars twinges. You ignore it. The apprentice arrives late, sleep still hanging off his face like a wet rag. You tell him to boil water, crush mint, sweep the floor. He nods, but not quickly. You sit by the window, watching the morning mist lift off the grass like steam off hot tea. Another patient arrives, then another, and another. Today is a flood. One man brings a mouthful of cracked enamel and asks if you can sharpen his teeth. You say no. One woman insists that a neighbor cursed her gums. You offer her clove paste and a charm carved from bone. She accepts both, pays with wool. A third patient walks in quietly and whispers, "Just one tooth, please." It's always just one tooth, until it isn't. By midday, your hands are shaking again. Your back aches. Your knees complain every time you crouch. You press a compress to your own temple just to stop the thudding behind your eyes. And then you remember the boy. You wonder if his fever will drop. You wonder if you'll be able to save the rest of his mouth. You wonder if he'll ever smile like a child again. Outside, the rain starts again. Soft this time. Rhythmic. Like the heartbeat of the job. One patient at a time. One scream. One breath. One tooth. The rain doesn't let up. It becomes a constant background. Soft, persistent, like someone lightly brushing their fingers on the edge of your sanity. The roof leaks in one corner, and you set a bucket beneath it, more out of routine than hope. It fills slowly. Everything here does. You sip what's left of your morning wine. It's warm, but only because you've been holding the cup so long. Your hands don't stop moving during the day, so now, in this moment of stillness, they twitch slightly like they miss the pliers. That doesn't last either. A figure appears at the door. You don't hear a knock. They just open it, and in steps someone new. He's tall, dressed better than most. A worn cloak, yes, but beneath it, boots without holes, a coat with buttons, hands too smooth for field work. He removes his hood and smiles, not widely but enough for you to see the glint of something artificial. You squint. It's gold, not a full tooth, just the front, capped like a crown made of pride. He speaks softly, his voice like velvet over gravel. He's heard of your work. He travels between towns, and he wants a tooth, a gold one, not for health, for vanity. You blink slowly, trying not to smile. Because here's the thing. Gold teeth in the medieval world are not unheard of, but they are rare and controversial. Historians still argue whether they were purely decorative or served a medical purpose. Some ancient civilizations, like the Etruscans, used gold bands to bind teeth. But in your little corner of the world, gold teeth are a statement, a very loud one. You ask him where the tooth will go. He taps his front incisor, still healthy. You raise an eyebrow. He grins. Let's keep it that way. You consider. You could make a mold. You've done it before, once. Press soft wax around the tooth, melt the gold, pour it into a carved bit of bone as a mold. Then, shape it. Slide it over. Seal it with pitch. Pray it holds. You nod slowly. He places a small bag of coins on your table. The clink alone could pay your rent twice. So you begin. You press wax gently against his tooth. He barely flinches. You cut around the impression, set it aside, and ask him to return in 2 days. He agrees. Before he leaves, he pulls back his cloak slightly and says, "The others will come too. They'll want theirs once they see it." You say nothing, but the words echo in your head. The others. You're not just the pain guy anymore. You're becoming fashionable. You glance over at your tools, lined up like weary soldiers, and wonder how they'll take the news. The apprentice is sweeping nearby. You tell him to prepare the pitch and get your small crucible ready. He nods, unsure but eager. Later that day, while your wax impression cools, you return to your usual patients. An old woman with only 3 teeth asks if you can realign them. You gently explain that realignment would mean removing all of them first. She declines. Instead, she hands you a pouch of walnuts and tells you you're handsome in the right light. A child brings in a mouse skull, insisting he's found the toothworm. You humor him. You place the skull on your shelf next to the bottle of crushed sage and the carved bone charm. You label it, for science. Then, a beggar arrives. No teeth, just sores. A mouth like a collapsed roof. He doesn't want anything pulled. He wants to remember how it felt to chew. You give him a strip of mint leaf soaked in vinegar. He swishes it, smiles for the first time in weeks, leaves humming. That night, you work on the gold mold. You melt the coin down carefully, stir the molten metal with an iron rod, pour it into the tiny tooth-shaped hollow carved into a bone block. It hisses softly, smokes gently, hardens quickly. You sand the edges with crushed sand and spit. It gleams in the candlelight. You hold it up to your mouth, not to wear, but to imagine. What would you look like, smiling with gold? You laugh quietly. Then the roof leaks again, splashing into the bucket. Back to reality. You store the gold cap in a cloth pouch, tied tight. It's the most expensive thing in your shop, and it weighs less than a walnut. You glance at your door, now shut against the wind. Tomorrow your patient returns. And if he smiles at the market with that gleaming front tooth, you won't just be the guy who stops the pain. You'll be the guy who makes people shine. The man returns the next morning, just as the mist is lifting off the rooftops. He walks with a little more confidence than yesterday. His boots are cleaner. His cloak hangs just a bit more proudly off his shoulders. It's a familiar posture. You've seen it on men before a duel, or merchants before a lie. He sits on the stool without waiting to be asked. You bring out the pouch. He watches carefully as you unwrap the small cloth, revealing the gleaming gold tooth cap nestled like a jewel in its folds. It catches the candlelight and flashes warm yellow. His eyes light up, not with gratitude, but with victory. This isn't about the tooth. It never was. You gently fit the cap over his front incisor. The pitch has been warmed, and you press it in place, holding it steady, careful not to burn the soft tissue around the gum. He grimaces, not from pain, but from anticipation. You release the pressure slowly. The cap stays. You tap it lightly. It doesn't budge. He licks the inside of his tooth, grins into your small iron mirror, and stands. No words. Just a nod and the unmistakable swagger of someone who now owns a luxury that no one else in town has. He leaves. You sit back and exhale, and wonder what you've just started. By noon, it begins. The first copycat shows up with a chipped molar and a handful of bronze coins. He wants something shiny in the back. You explain that molars aren't for showing off. He disagrees. Loudly. The second one comes that evening. She's a merchant's wife, middle-aged, sharp-tongued, and smelling faintly of lavender oil. She says her husband has a mistress with pearl earrings, and she wants something better. You suggest polishing her canines with vinegar. She calls you a hack, then hands you a gold ring and says, "Use this." You nod. You melt it. Within 3 days, word spreads. The tooth man now does fancy teeth. You're not ready. Neither is your apprentice, who drops the crucible twice and sets a patch of the floor on fire. You scold him mildly, then thank him for not dying. You realize you need more wax, more pitch, more cloth, and God's help you, more gold. But mostly you need time. Because between your shiny tooth customers, the real ones still come. The pain-stricken, the fevered, the infected. One man collapses on your floor before you can reach him. His jaw is twice the size it should be. You drain the abscess, carefully, cutting into the inner cheek with a curved blade, letting the fluid spill into a bowl. The smell makes the apprentice gag. You keep going. The man survives. Barely. That night, you don't sleep. You stare at the ceiling, watching the flicker of candlelight across the beams, wondering what happens when this becomes only about gold, when the screaming fades and the coin rises. You never meant to be a merchant. You meant to help. Mostly. But shiny teeth pay better. The next morning, you're visited by someone from the guild. Yes, that guild. The Barbers and Surgeons Guild has heard rumors, and they don't like what they hear. A man in black arrives with a seal and a list. He asks questions. How long have you practiced? Where did you study? Do you know Latin? Are you licensed? You nod. You shrug. You smile politely. He doesn't. He tells you the guild might visit again, that certain procedures are meant to be regulated, that ornamental dentistry is not a recognized practice, that pain relief is a serious responsibility. You offer him a mint-soaked cloth. He declines. You offer him a gold cap. For free. He pauses, then declines again, but he hesitates, and you file that away. Later, a boy comes in crying. His tooth is loose, naturally loose. He's maybe 8. You check it gently, assure him it'll fall on its own. He asks if he can keep it when it does. You nod. Then you reach for a small wooden charm and give it to him. He smiles with a gap already forming. No pain, no gold, just a memory. That evening, you add his name to your gentle book, a ledger of patients who didn't scream. It's the thinnest book you own. Outside, the fog rolls in again. The door creaks. Another shadow appears, another tooth, another story. And in your pocket, the coins clink softly, one by one, each a reminder that while some teeth save lives, others just shine. You're halfway through slicing a sliver of dried pear when the door crashes open and hits the wall so hard it knocks down your bundle of lavender. A woman storms in. No cloak, no shoes, mud streaked up to her knees. She's got that look people wear when they've already passed through pain, panic, and bargaining, and have landed squarely in desperation. She doesn't speak. She just turns her head and opens her mouth. There, right at the back, is a molar so rotten it looks like it's trying to escape. Blackened, split down the middle, red gums swollen so tight they gleam. She's been living with this. For days? Weeks? You gesture for her to sit. She obeys instantly. Her hands tremble as they grip the sides of the stool. Her breathing is shallow, rapid. This isn't just a bad tooth. This is fear. This is a woman who's seen others die of infection. Maybe she's watched someone choke on their own swelling. Maybe she's had the fever dreams. Maybe this morning, she woke up and couldn't feel the left side of her tongue. You ask nothing. You fetch the wine. She downs it in 3 swallows. You pack her cheek with clove and salt. She groans, eyes watering. You give her the stick to bite. She refuses it. You press your fingers against her jaw, feeling for the right angle. Then the pliers go in. The first pull does nothing. You shift your weight, bracing her skull against your shoulder. The second pull lifts the gum slightly. She whimpers. The third, crack, and the tooth breaks. She screams. The top half comes out easily. The root, not so much. You whisper for her to hold still. Your voice is low, steady, the way you speak to animals in pain. You reach for the file, and you begin to dig. This is the worst kind of extraction, when the tooth splits and leaves part of itself behind like a cruel joke. You work slowly, scraping, wiggling, praying the root doesn't fracture further. Eventually you get it. It comes out with a soft squelch and a thread of blood. You rinse the socket with vinegar. Press moss to it. Wrap her in a wool blanket while her body shakes through the pain. When she finally opens her eyes, she says nothing. Just lays a coin on the table and walks out barefoot into the mud. You sit there, holding the broken molar in your hand, the smell of blood and salt hanging heavy in the air. And then you remember, today's the tooth fair. Yes, really. Twice a year, your town holds what they lovingly call the tooth fair. It's not magical. There are no fairies. But there are crowds. Because medieval dentistry, for all its pain and mess, is also performance. You pack up your mobile tools, pliers, herbs, cloth, your loudest apprentice, and head for the square. The fair is already in full swing. Traders shouting, goats bleating, children weaving through the legs of butchers and pot sellers. You set up at your usual spot, near the fountain, under the faded red awning that used to be a tent. People gather fast, not because they need extractions, though they probably do, but because you're entertainment. Your apprentice beats the drum lightly. You hold up your tooth key with flair, and the crowd applauds. First patient, a drunken farmer missing half his teeth already, wants one more out. For balance, he slurs. You oblige. The crowd roars when the tooth flies 3 feet and lands in a child's basket. Next, a soldier's wife, stronger than she looks, doesn't flinch, doesn't scream. You give her a sprig of mint as a trophy. After the third patient, someone in the crowd shouts, "Do a gold one." You laugh it off. But others join in. They've heard the rumors. You smile, tap your tools together for effect and say, "Gold is for kings." The crowd loves that. You leave the square with 3 chickens, 2 loaves, and a sack of beans. No coin. But food keeps you just as alive. Later that evening, back in your shop, you sit on the stool, feet sore, shirt soaked with sweat, and other fluids you don't name. The apprentice is asleep in the corner, clutching a bag of moss like a teddy bear. You look over at the gold mold, still sitting on your shelf, waiting. Waiting for a world that wants teeth to shine more than they chew. You yawn and hear a knock. The door creaks open. Another shadow. Another mouth. Another tooth. You don't even flinch when the shadow steps through the doorway anymore. You've seen every kind of face in pain, young, old, noble, peasant, drunk, terrified, indifferent. But this one is different. She's covered in a dark veil, hands tucked into long sleeves. You can't see her face. She moves slowly, deliberately, like every step has meaning. Or maybe wait. She doesn't speak. She simply removes one glove and holds up a coin. Silver, newly minted, real. You take it. She sits. Then she lifts her veil. And for a moment, you forget to breathe. Not because of beauty, because of damage. Her mouth has been ravaged. Gums swollen, lips cracked and blackened in spots. Teeth, what remains of them, crooked, chipped, and eaten away at the base like termites found a way in. You've seen this before. Not often, but enough to name it. Mercury rot. She's likely been treated by another healer or an alchemist. Mercury salves are popular in some circles for infections, even for sores of the mouth. Problem is, they poison slowly. The lips burn, the gums die, the teeth loosen, fall out. You glance at her, then back at your tray. She gestures to one tooth in particular, an upper canine, hanging slightly out of alignment and rotting from the root. It twitches when she breathes. It wants to leave. She wants you to finish the job. You nod and begin preparing your tools. No wine this time. She waves it off. She's sober, intentional. You respect it. You pack her gum with clove, then vinegar, then place the mouth wedge gently between her back molars to keep her open just enough. You move in with the pliers. Her hands never move. Her eyes never close. You grip. You twist. The root is long, stubborn. You twist again.
Harder. It comes free with a long, wet snap that sends a spatter of blood against your apron. Still, she doesn't react. She only raises her veil and lowers her eyes. You press linen to the wound, pack it with crushed mint, and help her rinse. She stands. Before she leaves, she removes a second glove and hands you a tiny pouch. Inside, another silver coin and a tooth. Gold cap. Old. Worn. Probably pulled from someone else. It's too large to be hers. You glance up, but she's already gone. You don't ask questions. You never do. You place the coin in your jar. You set the tooth on your shelf. And you wonder, just briefly, how many more like her walk this world, wearing pain under layers of silk and silence. That evening, your apprentice returns from the market with a grin so wide you expect it to snap. He drops a pamphlet on your table. You blink. It's crudely printed, black ink, smudged, but unmistakably a drawing of a tooth crowned in gold with a small sketch of someone who might be you. The headline reads, "The Gold Smile of St. Cuthers Road." You stare at it, and at him. He shrugs. People are talking. You read the small text. Someone, probably that merchant from last week, has decided you're not just a dentist. You're a craftsman, an artist. The last line makes you laugh out loud. Don't fear the pain. Embrace the shine. You fold the pamphlet and tuck it behind a jar of leeches. Later that night, as you sit in the warm candlelight, a strange mix of feelings floods in. You've always worked in the dark, but now, your name is starting to float through conversations. Not just tooth man, not just pain guy, but something else. You check your tools. Clean, worn, faithful. Then your ledger. More names, more days, and your coin jar, heavier than it's been in months. Still, outside, the wind howls, and you know tomorrow's patients will bleed the same, whether you're famous or not. You tuck the gold-capped tooth into your collection. The rain starts again, and you blow out the candle.
The rain doesn't stop. You wake to it. Softer now, more like a whisper than a drumbeat. It taps on the windows, slips under the door, weaves its way into your bones. You stretch slowly, every joint crackling like old firewood. Your hands are stiff today. Too many pulls in too few hours. You flex your fingers one by one, like you're taking attendance. You start the fire and set a kettle over the coals. Not for tea, though mint leaf and crushed thyme float in the water, but for steam. It helps ease the scent of vinegar and blood that clings to your walls. You open the shutters, and that's when you see them. 2 children, standing under a soaked hood of burlap, shivering, silent. The older one, maybe 10, carries the younger on her hip. The little one's head lolls, eyes half closed, cheeks flushed with fever. Her mouth is slightly open, her lips crusted with drool. You don't need to ask. You motion them in. The girl doesn't hesitate. She carries her sister through the door and straight to the stool, without ceremony or fear. She's done this before, caring, carrying, making choices that should never fall on shoulders that small. You lift the younger girl's chin. The infection is deep. One of the baby molars has erupted sideways, tearing the gum from within. The pus trails along her tongue like honey gone wrong. She's burning with fever, breathing fast. Not long now. The older girl meets your eyes and says simply, "Fix her." You nod. You reach for your thinnest pliers and your strongest wine. She's too small for either. So you take something different from the shelf, a few drops of poppy syrup. Rare, risky, but better than nothing. You place 1 drop on the tip of a spoon and ease it between the girl's lips. She winces but swallows. Then another drop on a mint leaf. Then you wait. You whisper to her softly, nonsense words. comforting rhythms. You rub her tiny palm with your thumb. Her breathing slows. You move in. The molar gives easier than expected. Already loose. You wiggle, twist, brace your fingers against her jaw, soft as pottery, and lift. The tooth slips free with barely a sound. You clean the wound, drain the gum with a linen square, press mint and moss to the socket, then wrap her in a blanket and sit her in your lap. The older girl watches every motion like a hawk. She'll sleep, you tell her. That's good. She nods and hands you a copper coin tied to a string. It was my father's, she says. You take it, not because you want it, because you have to. It means she'll believe her sister will wake up. Later, as the two of them curl up on a pallet by the fire, you sit nearby, polishing your pliers with a rag that's more blood-stained than cloth. The door creaks again. You raise your eyes. It's not a patient this time. It's the priest. Tall, thin, smelling of incense and damp linen. He looks at the sleeping girls, then at your tools. You're doing work that used to belong to God, he says. You don't answer. He steps closer. You should offer confession. You smile faintly. Which part? The wine, the blood, or the part where they stop screaming? He doesn't laugh. He places a hand on your shoulder. You hold people's mouths in your hands. Be careful what else you take. He leaves without another word. You sit there, candle flickering, the priest's warning hanging in the air like smoke. Outside, someone sings a lullaby in the street. Off-key, gentle. You don't believe in saints, but tonight you tuck the copper coin under the girl's blanket, just in case. And when the youngest stirs, mumbling in her sleep, you smile. Not the flashy grin of a man selling gold teeth, but the quiet one, the one you save for yourself when no one else is watching. The little girl wakes before dawn. She blinks up at you, lips still swollen, but eyes bright. Her sister stirs beside her, immediately alert, hand reaching protectively. You nod gently. All is well. You hand them both warm cloth soaked in mint water. The younger sips slowly. The older, still watching you, says nothing. You pack them a small satchel, soft bread, crushed thyme, and a strip of cloth soaked in clove, in case the ache returns. They don't offer more coin. They just nod and walk out into the morning mist, burlap hood tugged over both their heads like a tent against the world. You watch until they disappear. Then, with a sigh, you begin to boil your tools. Your apprentice enters mid-scrub, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He opens the shutters. Light seeps in cautiously, as if unsure if it's welcome here. You hear the clatter of hooves. Moments later, your door opens again. This time, 2 guards enter, not locals. And behind them, a man in fur. Expensive fur, the kind you've only seen once before, on a noble who spat blood into a golden bowl while threatening to kill you if you touched the wrong tooth. This one is younger, broad, clean-shaven. His gloves are too soft for his trade. My master sent for you, one of the guards says. You glance down. Their boots are clean. They haven't been in the village long. You nod. You gather your tools, still hot from the pot. Wrap them. Sling your bag over your shoulder. You ride with them into the woods. The estate is newer. Shiny stone, arched windows, a wrought iron gate that seems more decorative than defensive. Inside, servants usher you to a sitting room where a man waits, stretched out on a chaise, breathing shallowly. He's sweating. You lift his chin gently, pull back his lip, and you almost recoil. The entire upper row is infected, gums blistered, canines loose. The rot has spread across the palate. You've seen mouths like this before, but not in a man this young. You glance at the servant. How long? Since the swelling began, maybe 2 weeks. You ask about fever. He nods. Dreams? Yes. You ask if he's eaten? No. You sit back slowly. This isn't just infection. It's necrosis. Parts of the gum are already dead. You hesitate. The tools you've brought might not be enough. You'd need a full cutting kit, a poultice thick enough to draw heat from bone, and the time, days, to work in layers. They want a miracle. You only brought pliers. Still you begin. You pick the worst tooth first, a molar, left rear. Loose. You pack the area with sage and clove, then go in. The tooth lifts easily, too easily. It's hollow. You pull 4 more over the next hour. Each comes out with barely a protest. The man whimpers. One servant faints. The other holds a candle. You rinse the socket with vinegar. Stitch a tear in the gum with coarse thread. You apply crushed garlic to the remaining tissue, mixed with honey. It burns. He screams. But when it's done, he breathes easier. The bleeding slows. The swelling eases. He sleeps. You are paid in coin, more than usual. The steward asks if you'll return. You say, if he survives the night. You mean it. You walk back alone. You arrive home before the sky darkens. Your apprentice is cleaning the floor. He doesn't ask questions, but he hands you a folded scrap of parchment. It's from the boy with the gold tooth, the pamphlet artist. He's drawn a new image, your profile now. And the caption reads, "The Mouth Mender of Morrow Hill." You sigh. You pin it to the wall. And for the first time in weeks, you laugh. Not because it's funny, but because it's absurd. Your door creaks. A man walks in with a bleeding tongue and a black eye. He says, "Bar fight, tooth's gone. But I think it left something behind." You grab your scraper. No fame, no gold. Just another mess to clean. You're almost done scraping the last of the bar fight out of the man's mouth when he coughs blood across your sleeve. You don't flinch. You've stopped flinching at anything, really. Blood, screams, half-chewed leaves of home remedies, even the occasional tooth that pops loose before you even touch it. All of it has become background noise. You pack the man's gum with linen, rinse it with salt water, and send him off with a cloth to bite, and the vague advice to avoid punches for at least a day. You peel off your stained outer tunic and hang it by the fire. The smell rises with the steam. Salt, iron, moss, smoke. If someone bottled this scent, it would be called Desperation Eau de Tooth. You're about to sit when the bell rings again. This time it's the blacksmith, which is funny because usually you end up treating his hand burns and splintered nails. But today, he's sheepish. You can see it before he even speaks. His fingers twitch near his jaw. He opens his mouth. No words, just a deep, rumbling groan, and you see the problem. A shard of iron, wedged in his molar. You blink. He explains. Forging a blade, metal flared, splintered. A piece flew into his mouth. Don't ask how, and lodged itself where a piece of lamb should have been. You shake your head. Sit him down. He's a big man. Your stool groans. You have to stand on a crate to reach the right angle. You see the glint of iron lodged just under the gum line. It's not deep, but it's awkward. The kind of thing that will either come out easily or cause 3 new problems in the process. You grab the tweezers. He grips the armrests. You go in, a gentle pull, a shift, a flick. It's out. He exhales, head falling back in relief. You hold up the sliver of metal like a war trophy. Then you glance at it again and get an idea. Later, when he's gone and the light is low, you take that sliver of iron and set it beside your other tools. It has a slight curve to it. You file one end, shape it, heat it, and you make a new scraper. A gift from pain, a relic from fire. Your tools are always evolving, each with a story, a scar. You line them up, your first tooth key, still stiff with rust. The bent pliers you refuse to throw out. The file made from a wine opener. And now this, the blacksmith's sliver. You run your fingers along the handles. Then someone knocks again. No words, just 3 soft taps. You open the door. It's a woman in her 40s. Straight posture. No veil. No cloak. Just a small wooden box in her hands. Inside, she says, are her father's teeth. You pause. She continues. He died last month. He had 4 gold-capped teeth. She wants them removed from the skull and melted down. You hesitate. This isn't common, not illegal, but strange. She offers no explanation. Just coin. You take the box. You open it later, after she's gone. The teeth are still in the jawbone. The flesh has been stripped, but the sockets remain tight. It takes time, care. You extract them one by one. You don't know the man's name. But each tug feels like a strange kind of betrayal. You melt the gold down that night and forge a new cap. Not for anyone in particular, but because now you can. The next day, a messenger arrives. A royal seal. A summons. A different kind of noble this time. One with a name. A location. And a request for discretion. You read the letter twice. Then again. You're being asked not just for your hands, but for your silence. You pack your tools. Your apprentice begs to come. You shake your head. This job is different. This one could change things. You close your shop for the day. Hang a small sign. Gone to treat royalty. Back when they stopped screaming. No one steals anything while you're gone. Because even thieves are scared of your patient records. You arrive at the manor by evening. It's quiet. Gilded. Guarded. You're led inside by a man with one eye and too many rings. And in the master's chamber, beneath a tapestry of lions and saints, lies a young noblewoman. She turns her head and opens her mouth, and you see the future. It is not gold. It is not rot. It is something else entirely. But that's for tomorrow. Tonight, you sleep in a bed made of feathers and dream, for once, not of teeth, but of silence. The bed is too soft. That's the first thing you notice. Your body, so used to straw, to wood, to the stiff bend of your own floor after a late shift, doesn't know what to do with this much give. The sheets smell like lavender and beeswax. There's a feather pillow beneath your head, and you're uncomfortable in a way only comfort can cause. Still you sleep, deeply, because tomorrow someone with a crest and coin is waiting for your hands. At dawn, servants rouse you gently, like your fragile glass. A warm cloth, a fresh tunic, even breakfast. Real breakfast. Bread without mold. Honey, berries. You hesitate, then eat it all. They lead you up a spiral staircase to a room with pale stone walls and arched windows. Sunlight pours in as if summoned. She's there. The young noblewoman, maybe 16, maybe less. Lying propped up in a cushioned chair, jaw slightly parted. One cheek is bruised, and she looks away when you meet her eyes. You can already tell she hasn't spoken in days. A woman in gray stands nearby. A governess, probably. She doesn't speak either. Just gestures you forward with a stiff nod. You kneel beside the chair. Gently lift the girl's chin. She flinches, but lets you look. Her teeth are perfect. Straight. White. Well, white enough. But something is wrong. You press lightly on the gum line near her back molar. She jerks again. You nod. An abscess. Hidden. Deep. Probably started small and went unnoticed. She's been too proud or too scared to say anything. And now the swelling has reached the jaw. If it spreads further, it could close her throat. You speak softly. It needs to come out. She doesn't respond, but her hand tightens around the edge of her gown. The governess approaches and whispers something in her ear. The girl finally nods. The room clears except for you, her, and the silent woman in gray. You clean your hands, set your tools, choose the smallest pliers and a strip of linen dipped in lavender oil, not for pain, but calm. You explain each step, not because she needs to know, because you think maybe no one has ever explained things to her before. She lifts her hand again and offers something, a ribbon. Pale blue. You tie it around your wrist without asking why. She opens her mouth. You work. Slowly. You grip the swollen gum. Pack it with clove. Steady your hand. You feel the root shift. She trembles, but doesn't cry. You twist gently. The tooth slides free with a wet pop. You don't cheer. You don't show it. You just press linen to the wound and whisper, "You did it." And she smiles. Barely. But it's real. Later, the steward brings you a small chest. Coins. Gold. Too much. You refuse half. He insists. You take a third. They offer you wine, a room, a bath. You decline. You return home just after sunset. Pouch heavy. Legs sore. The apprentice is asleep on the workbench, drooling into a recipe for tooth powder. You wake him gently. Boil water, you say. Clean the pliers. He stirs, groans, obeys. You sit by the fire. You remove the ribbon from your wrist and hang it from a hook above your bench, next to the tooth key, next to the broken saint's charm, next to the sliver of iron from the blacksmith's mouth. Relics, trophies, truths. The next day, word spreads. Not about the girl, but about you. Whispers in alleyways, in taverns, by candlelight. They say you fixed a noble's pain without making her scream. That your hands are blessed. That you wear ribbons from royal wrists. You don't correct them. You just keep working. You pull a tooth from a baker who hasn't slept in 3 nights. You drain an abscess from a farmhand who bit into a stone. You polish the caps of a merchant who now smiles in every conversation. And when the sun sets, you light your candle. And you write her name, just initials, into your ledger. Then close the book gently. The work is never done. But some names you keep, not for record, but for memory. The next few days blur together. Tooth after tooth, rot after rot. Your hands move almost automatically now. Pack, twist, pull, rinse, wrap, reassure. The same rhythm, over and over, like the ticking of a clock powered by pain. But then comes a knock. Not the usual kind, not hurried, not desperate. 3 sharp raps, clean, deliberate. You open the door to find a man dressed in dark wool, dry despite the morning drizzle, his hands clasped behind his back. He doesn't smile, doesn't speak, just hands you a sealed letter and vanishes down the street before you can ask a single question. You close the door slowly and break the wax. The letter is written in precise Latin, which you can barely read, but the name stamped at the bottom is clear enough. The Royal College of Barber Surgeons. They know. They've heard about your tooth caps, your extractions, your herbal rinses and painted pamphlets. They request your presence. It's not a threat. Not quite. It's a summons. An opportunity, maybe. Or a warning with calligraphy. You sit for a long time, staring at the paper. Then you fold it carefully and place it under your ledger. That afternoon, you pull a molar from a man who insists you sprinkle his wound with salt so demons can't return. You don't argue. You perform a full cleaning on a tailor who pays in linen scraps. You accept. You drain pus from the jaw of a butcher who tells you without irony, "I've never seen someone carve like you." You take that as a compliment. Later, a woman arrives with a newborn in one arm and a cracked tooth in the other, her own. You extract it while she sings to the child. She thanks you with tears, not coin. And still, the letter waits. That night, you take a walk, rare for you, through narrow alleys, across the square, past the bakery where the flour always smells burned. You stop at the edge of the river, sit on a stone and listen. The town hums quietly behind you. Distant voices, a dog barking, the slow clop of a tired cart horse. You hold the letter in your lap. This job, it's always been yours, but never officially. You remember your first patient, a boy with a chipped tooth and too much fear to speak. You remember your first extraction, your first infection, your first death. And now, a guild wants to see you, to test you, to accept you. Maybe, maybe not. Historians still argue whether joining a guild meant recognition or restriction, whether it elevated your practice or buried it in red tape and rules. You sigh and walk back home. The next morning, you clean your tools with more care than usual. You file the edges, you polish the handles, you pack each one in its proper place, and you prepare to leave. The apprentice tries to hide his panic behind a mop. You pat his shoulder. "Only gone 2 days," you say. He nods, then drops a jar of clove paste and spends 10 minutes apologizing. You write a note for the door. Not long. Just, "Gone to see the men with ink and questions." You wrap your cloak tight and begin the walk. It's longer than expected. Past fields, through villages, across a river swollen with rain and stories. The college is larger than you imagined. Stone columns. A carved arch over the door that reads, "Salus per scientiam." Health through knowledge. You mutter, more like health through moss and hope. But step inside anyway. You're ushered into a long room with benches and burning oil lamps. 5 men sit behind a high table. Their robes are clean. Their fingernails are immaculate. You set your bag on the floor. They ask for your name, your method, your tools, your ingredients. You speak slowly, plainly. You explain how you dry clove and powder sage, how you warm pitch and wrap linen, how you melt gold not for display but for dignity. One man scoffs, another nods. The third asks you to demonstrate. They hand you a model skull. It has a fake abscess in the lower jaw. You extract it cleanly. They ask how you'd treat a fever that follows. You answer, vinegar, willow bark, and prayer. Not necessarily in that order. They thank you. You leave with no clear answer. Just a second letter, unsealed, bearing the college's crest and the word, pending. You walk home under a sky smeared with purple and orange. And when you arrive, there's a line. 7 people, 2 dogs, 1 man playing a flute while clutching his jaw. You sigh, roll up your sleeves, and start again. By morning, your legs ache from standing too long the night before. You barely got the door closed before the line outside began reshuffling, yawning, repositioning, half of them still in their sleep clothes. You look out your tiny window. 2 women. One toothless but smiling, the other holding her face like it might explode. A boy with a swollen cheek. A merchant rubbing his gums with what appears to be a cinnamon stick. You let out a slow breath and pull open the door. Next, it doesn't stop for hours. Each patient is a blur of cracked enamel and whispered apologies. One old man keeps handing you mushrooms instead of coin. Another insists on being called captain, despite the fact that he has no ship and appears to be missing 3 toes. But between them all, you notice something different. Something creeping in like ivy over a stone wall. They know you now. Not just your name, your reputation. Some come not just for pain relief, but because they've heard of your steady hands, your quiet nature, the ribbon you wear around your wrist, the gold, the nobles, the college. They speak your story before you do. Is it true you pulled a cursed tooth from a priest? Did you really melt a lady's dowry into a crown? Do your leeches know Latin? You laugh, politely. You shake your head, but you don't correct them. Because part of healing is hope, even if it's wrapped in myth. Midday arrives, a rare lull. You step outside into the sunlight and stretch your arms. For a moment, your back doesn't hurt. A soft voice interrupts. Tooth puller? You turn. A boy, maybe 13, holding a bag close to his chest. He opens it and reveals a dog. Small, shivering, missing patches of fur, and yes, a horribly swollen jaw. You crouch, glance at the boy. He looks desperate, embarrassed, hopeful. Can you? He asks. You pause. You've never worked on animals before, but a tooth is a tooth. You lift the dog gently. Feel the heat of infection pulsing from its gums. One molar is blackened, cracked. The dog licks your wrist. You sigh. Bring him inside. The apprentice stares. You're doing what? You ignore him. You make a compress. Warm a bit of honey and sage. Apply it carefully. You don't pull yet. Just soothe. Ease the pain. The dog whimpers once, then rests. You send the boy away with instructions. Feed him soft bread soaked in broth. Come back tomorrow. He nods and leaves without speaking. You sit there, holding a now empty bowl, wondering when your job became this. A healer. For everyone. And everything. That evening, a courier arrives, dusty, out of breath. He hands you a rolled scroll. It's from the Royal College. You break the seal with shaking fingers. The message is short. Accepted. Position open. Travel expected. Compensation considerable. Your heart doesn't race. It pauses. Because for all the years you've toiled in back rooms and roadside fairs, for all the teeth, the screams, the nights where you slept beside a fire with moss under your fingernails, this is what others dream of. Recognition. Prestige. But it comes with a cost. They want you to move, to leave your shop, your town, your people, your apprentice, your ledger, the names written carefully in charcoal. You read the letter again, then set it aside. The next morning the dog returns, tail wagging, the boy grinning. The swelling has gone down. You nod. Now it's time to pull. You do it fast, gently. The dog yelps, just once, then licks your nose. You wrap the tooth in cloth and hand it to the boy like a treasure. He cradles it like it shines. That evening, you look at the scroll again. You could go. You could be doctor. You could wear a robe with trim and be addressed with titles. But who would treat the boy with the dog? Who would pull teeth from farmers who pay in wool? Who would explain to a merchant that toothworms aren't real? But yes, the clove helps anyway. So you fold the scroll and hang it next to the ribbon. A trophy, not a path. You take your tools from the shelf, light the candle, and scrub your hands. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again, because you are the pain bearer, the mouth mender, the tooth man. And for now, this is exactly where you belong. The days begin to blend together in a rhythm so steady, it feels like breathing. Sunrise, open shutters, boil water, scrub tools, stretch hands, straighten ledger. Then the knocking begins. First, a woman with a loose front tooth, afraid to smile at her new husband. You tell her it won't fall out if she chews gently. Probably. She laughs, and you realize it's the first sound of joy in your shop all week. Then a stonemason who chipped a molar during lunch. He swears he bit into a curse. You nod as you twist the broken piece out. They do that, you say. Then a nobleman in disguise. Sort of. He wears a hood, but keeps flashing a ring every time he gestures. He wants a gold inlay for a tooth that doesn't hurt yet. You ask him why. He shrugs. Fashion. You make the mold. In between visits, your apprentice keeps asking questions. What's the worst mouth you've seen? What happens if someone swallows a tooth? Can you make a fake one out of bone? You answer most of them. Some you make up. The one about bone? You tell him to practice carving and come back with something that doesn't look like a chicken claw. He carves anyway. You pretend not to be impressed. One evening, a man comes in with all of his teeth and none of his memory. He sits on your stool, eyes hollow, hands twitching. Says he woke up in a ditch. Doesn't know his name, but his mouth hurts. You inspect him gently. Gums are inflamed. There's a long scratch across the roof of his mouth, too straight for a fall. A blade, maybe. You clean him up. Give him a rinse of sage and mint. Send him off with a soft cloth and a jar of clove paste. He smiles like he hasn't smiled in years. He still doesn't know his name. You write him into your ledger as man with missing past. A few days later, he brings you soup. People begin leaving things outside your door. A wedge of cheese, a bundle of thyme, a single red ribbon. You don't know who leaves what, but you hang the ribbon next to the blue one and smile. Your apprentice creates a new system for organizing your tools. Scrapers here, pliers there, pitch pots lined neatly in a row. You let him name them. He calls the smallest scraper Needle's Kiss. He's dramatic. You allow it, because he stays late. Sweeps, sorts teeth, asks smart questions like, shouldn't we be boiling the moss before packing it in? You say, yes. Then wonder why you never thought of that. One morning, you're interrupted by shouting. You open the door to find a man dragging a goat and insisting it needs a cleaning. You decline, gently. Another patient arrives with a bag of human teeth, wants them strung into a necklace. You say no. He offers coin. You say no again, firmly. He leaves, but drops one tooth on your doorstep. It has a silver pin inside. Someone else has been doing your work. You wonder who. The town starts referring to you in more specific terms, not just Tooth Man. Now it's the one who works fast, the one who doesn't judge, the one who talks to children like they're adults and adults like they're human. You don't correct them. But sometimes you wonder, when did this stop being survival and start becoming purpose? One night, you light the candle late, just to sit. You run your fingers across your tools. Each one has a scar. Each one has a story. You pick up the sliver of iron, once lodged in a blacksmith's jaw, and feel its edge. Smooth now, worn from use, like your hands. The ledger is open beside you. Names filling the pages. Some underlined, some circled, some with tiny notes. Cried, laughed, paid in potatoes, brought dog. You smile, then close the book and blow out the light. Outside, the moon is high. The wind hums against the shutters like a lullaby written in pain and healing. And you sleep, dreamless, because you already live inside the story. It's market day. The town smells like bread, sweat, and onions. You can hear the rustle of wool cloaks and the rattle of carts all the way from your shop, even before you open the shutters. Someone's playing a pipe near the butcher's stall again, badly. A dog barks every third note. You open your door and find 3 patients already waiting. You don't even ask how long they've been there. You just beckon them in, one by one. The first is a weaver with a broken molar and no coin, but she offers a new set of linen wraps for your tools. You accept. The second is a fisherman who claims a cursed tooth is making him hallucinate sea serpents. You pack his gums with mint and suggest he stop drinking brine. He does not laugh. The third is an elderly woman who just wants someone to listen. She says her teeth are fine, but her daughter-in-law isn't, and she suspects witchcraft. You nod sympathetically. Give her a sprig of lavender. She kisses your cheek and leaves smiling. At midday, you close the door briefly, just to breathe. Your apprentice walks in holding a strange object. It's a carved wooden tooth. Crude, but clever. He's shaped it to fit over a small peg of bone. Think it could work? he asks. You study it. The idea isn't absurd. In fact, historians still argue whether early dentures were first used by Japanese craftsmen or French surgeons. Some accounts mention animal bone, others ivory. But this is homemade. Human. You nod slowly. Maybe. You test the fit on a jawbone you keep for practice. It slips slightly, but not bad for a first try. He beams. You say nothing. But inside, you're already planning the design improvements. That evening, a familiar face appears at your door. The governess, from the noble girl. She says nothing at first, just hands you a sealed letter. You break it. Inside is a note in neat, uncertain handwriting. No more pain. Thank you. M. You fold the letter and slip it into your ledger. Right between merchant with 3 molars and man who swallowed a coin. It deserves its place. You clean your tools extra carefully that night. And then, just before sleep, you notice something strange. Your back doesn't ache. Not as much. Your hands don't tremble. Not like before. The sharp edge of weariness has softened into something quieter. Smoother. Like a scar that finally closed. In the morning, a child arrives with a tooth in her pocket, already fallen out. She says she wanted you to have it. You thank her. Wrap it in cloth. Place it in your growing bowl of gifts. It's less frightening now, that bowl. More like proof of pain endured, of healing shared. Your apprentice polishes the scraper without being asked. You nod. He nods back. You don't say it out loud. But you think, if this is the rest of your life, you'll take it, one tooth at a time. The day starts without pain, which is strange. You wake up and realize, for once, there's no one banging on the door. No line, no wails, no teeth in cloth pouches waiting like tiny confessions. Just stillness. The fire's low but glowing. The air carries a whisper of mint and warmed pitch. Your tools are lined up, already cleaned. Your ledger is closed. The apprentice is still asleep, curled near the hearth, a scrap of parchment with denture sketches clutched in his fingers. You stretch, slowly. Your shoulders creak, but less than usual. You step outside and the street is quiet. It's early, but the kind of early that feels peaceful, not waiting. No screaming, no bleeding. Just birds. Mist. The faint smell of something baking. Maybe pear tarts if the baker hasn't burned them again. You wander without really planning to. Past the square. Past the little bridge. To the field where people sometimes gather for festivals or arguments. You sit on a stump. The same one you used to rest on when you first started this work. When your hands shook every time you picked up the pliers. When each scream clung to your ribs like a debt. You pull from your pocket a tooth, one of the first. Cracked, blackened, fused to a tiny sliver of jawbone. You could toss it, bury it, forget it. But you don't. You carry it not for pride, but for weight, for memory. You think about how many mouths you've seen, how many lives you've touched, how many people walked into your shop afraid and left, still hurting maybe, but better. You remember the boy with the dog, the noble girl with the ribbon, the man with no name, the weaver, the smith, the widow who left you wild time and a kiss on the hand, and somewhere among all those cracked, groaning mouths, you found purpose. The wind stirs your cloak. You head back to your shop, because the quiet never lasts. And sure enough, someone's waiting when you return. Not at the door. Inside. Your apprentice. He's cleaned the tools, laid out linen, lit the fire. Should I start the tincture? He asks. You smile and nod. You pull your ledger from the shelf, flip to a blank page, date it, dip your quill, and pause, just for a moment. Then write. Today, no teeth yet, but I'm ready. because someone always comes. And when they do, you'll still be here, still boiling water, still soaking herbs, still listening, still pulling pain one root at a time, still the mouth mender, the pain eater, the one who stays, no matter what. And now, the light fades from your little shop. The fire burns low. The tools sit quietly in their place. Scrapers, pliers, the humble sliver of iron once lodged in a blacksmith's jaw, now part of your healing ritual. Outside, the street is calm. No footsteps, no cartwheels. Just the occasional sigh of wind through crooked shutters. You close the ledger, not because the work is over, but because, for tonight, there are no teeth to pull, no fevers to cool, no curses to answer, only silence. And you, sitting by the fire, hands resting in your lap, eyes soft. In the corner, your apprentice sleeps again. A gentle snore, a sketch still clutched in his palm, his future already beginning. You look at the ribbon tied above your bench, the gold cap, the letter from the college, all reminders that the world outside this town sees your worth now. But that's not why you stayed. You stayed because healing doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it hums, and sometimes it walks through your door with a cracked tooth, no coin, and a bag of apples. You smile at that. The fire crackles one last time. You rise, douse the candle, and let the darkness wrap around you like a familiar cloak. You've done enough today. Close your eyes. Rest your hands. Let the pain wait for morning. It always does.